Greetings and welcome there, people of YouTube. It's me again, and I'm here today to talk about a personal story involving something that happened to me during my university work placement. Now, why am I doing this? Well, I think it acts as a pretty solid reminder of just how far society has to go on the topic of trans people, as well as justifies the existence of trans-specific resources, even though there are a number of LGBT+ charities out there. Though I just want to make clear, this is not a call to action. I'm not raging at the charity over what happened. I'm not ordering anyone to reach for their pitchforks. I'm just using a life experience to show where we're at in hopes that it leaves you a little more knowledgeable on the subject. I was an adult at the time and I responded there and then as I felt appropriate. And I won't be saying the charity's name in this video, simply for the fact that it's not about them specifically. It's a general observation. I'm just using an extreme example to make the clearest point I can. I know there are those of you who have been with me since before my work placement, and many of you may remember what it was called, but please respect my wishes on this point and don't post the name of said charity, which, for the purposes of this video, shall now be referred to as Skittles. We clear? Cool. The placement year was part of my 4-year sandwich course, taking place during the 3rd year. We were supposed to find a field relevant to our course, and whilst many chose paid options, I chose unpaid charity work. Think of it like a university-monitored gap year. I remember having looked into humanist organisations before finally settling on volunteering for an LGBT+ charity, which is where Skittles comes in. I first contacted Skittles a few months before summer, and things moved pretty slowly at first. They weren't all too quick to confirm anything, and at one point I even questioned as to whether I'd actually be able to do a work placement or if I just have to take a normal gap year. But then they greenlit everything and I signed all of the forms and sent them off to my university. But as part of said placement I had to complete an interview, though interview may have been too strong a word for it. Pretty much I sat amongst the sofas in the front room, the place where the trans and bisexual group meetings were held, and I talked to both the financial head and the head of operations, who had just returned from dinner. The charity could only afford to stay open beyond 4 o'clock a couple days of the week, and this wasn't one of them, so it was just us. I was given the tour before returning home, ready to start in the last week of August. And the reason I'm giving you all this backstory is for one simple reason. What happened took place on my very first day at working at Skittles. I got the 45-minute train in, switching over once, before making my way through the town centre and towards my new workplace. I remember I was pretty nervous. Outside of a week's work placement in Boots the Chemist at school, I hadn't worked in public. I'm pretty low cost. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do drugs, and I'm certainly not a partier. I never needed any extra money. Then my channel got off the ground, and that plus my student maintenance was enough to live by. So I wasn't exactly sure as to what I should expect. I remember the feeling as I rang the doorbell and waited for an answer on the intercom. It was my mentor who answered, a rather lovely northerner with a strong accent. I say mentor because he was the social media and marketing manager, and I was his assistant. But the fact is, we were both the same age and he'd only started working there a few months prior. So he herded me inside and took me through to the operations centre in the back, the place where all the computers and phone lines were set up. Back there I met 2 more volunteers. Another young man, a couple of years older than me and my mentor, who was acting community manager, and a much older woman around her 50s. She used to turn up to do some odd work here and there, and I remember her working on a list of queer definitions as I arrived. And I don't mean the new digital terms, but old queer terminology. Stuff I've never heard of before. The community manager showed me what he was currently working on as well. It was a poster for an event that was planned to take place on the high street in a couple of weeks, working with a local artist to raise awareness of the charity's existence. He showed me what he had created so far, right before he went ahead and deleted the Photoshop file by accident. So that's my first job, replicating the half-completed PNG with filler text on Photoshop. Now he left me to do this because he had to go off and make some final preparations with the artist. And I don't remember if my mentor went with him or if they went to do something else. This was the run-up period to the local pride that was taking place that weekend. But either way, I found myself alone with just the woman. Things started out nice enough. She asked me about how I got involved with the charity, what's my sexuality and gender, all things I was perfectly happy to talk to her about. I explained that I was doing my work placement year and that I was both bisexual and gender fluid, to which she responded, "What's gender fluidity?" And I was all too happy to explain that my gender shifted over time. Sometimes I was male, sometimes I was female, sometimes I was androgynous. That's when, without a pause, she asked me, "Have you had the surgery on your genitals yet?" Okay, suddenly creepy person I'd only met like 2 hours ago. Why are you asking me about my genitals in a work environment? And this is bad enough in any work environment, but we are in a fucking operation center for an LGBT plus charity. We had the phone lines open for people, ready to respond with information and support anytime we had a call. I just withdrew at that point. Any confidence I had built in the short time I'd been there, that just vanished. Suffice to say, I did not answer her question, and she seemed genuinely disappointed, like I was being a massive prude in not sharing extremely personal information with a complete stranger. Like, I'm fine talking about my sexuality and gender since they're both social elements. My sexuality impacts who I date and are thus seen with, and my gender dictates how I interact with others and hopefully others respond to me. But I don't go around greeting people with my genitals. After that, there was just this awkward silence between us until the others arrived back, and at one point we were also joined by the financial head of the charity. Now, later that day I approached both my mentor and the financial head and explained to them what had occurred. And I didn't have to explain why it was an issue for them. They got it immediately and promised to resolve the issue. How they did so, I still don't know. I never got any sort of an apology from her, and she only showed up a few times before she just stopped coming. And part of me blamed myself for that, thinking that me telling my mentor what had happened had caused her to leave, and maybe I should just kept it to myself. But the fact is, it's not appropriate. It actually comes under the 2010 Equality Act definition of sexual harassment, since said definition isn't limited to intention. I get that she wasn't trying to violate my dignity and create a degrading work environment, but that was the effect, and it really should not have happened in an LGBT plus charity of all places. Do note, I was the only trans member of staff who was full-time at that point. There were other trans members of staff, but they did the nights where the charity stayed open late or the weekend groups. Fact is, I remember that incident having a hardening effect on me. Like, after that I became far more assertive in myself. Like, I remember the financial head of the charity talking to my mentor about trans people at our Christmas party, specifically about non-binary folk like myself, which is fine. The only problem was they were using the pronoun it to refer to us. At which point I had to step in and go, "No, that is not correct. If you've forgotten or don't know a person's gender, default to gender neutral, they singular." And this is something they should have known since we had posters on the walls covering this before I was there. I explained to them that said pronouns were dehumanizing and they picked up on it quickly. It wasn't the same as the online discourse I've come to expect when I correct someone on their pronoun usage. You know, the whole double down and "are you triggered" response. They genuinely took it on board and improved their work conduct. But again, this does show us why trans-specific charities, or at the very least trans-specific positions inside of general LGBT plus charities, are a necessity. And the same is true of lesbians and trans men. I had the surreal experience of watching in disbelief as a cis woman and a trans woman try to explain the fact that women have a separate urethra and vagina inside the vulva to two cis gay men. Like, that was an experience. Fact is, this isn't so much a problem with the charity I was working at. Really, it's a sign of a bigger societal problem. These are basic things that should be covered under comprehensive sex and relationship education, but aren't. SRE was still abysmal when I went through it. I remember when I was 16, so this is 2011, and had already been outed as bisexual. I was approached in school by a group of cis girls who kept arguing that what me and my boyfriend at the time were doing was against the law. Apparently they'd been taught that the age of consent for same-gender couples, I wasn't out as trans by this point, was 18. 2 years more than it was for the opposite gender couples. And this had been the law in the UK at one point, before the 2000 Sexual Offences Amendment Act. So this teacher was giving students information that was a decade out of date. So again, this isn't the charity's fault, it's the fault of shitty SRE in the UK. But we can't become overconfident and secure in the fact that LGBT+ charities exist. Specialised resources are still important. It's also important to note this sort of thing, which is often classed under the umbrella of microaggressions. Now, I wasn't aggressive in my response to what happened to me, and I'm not acting out of aggression right now, but I understand why some trans people, as with people of other minority groups, aren't so prickly, and they shouldn't be beat down for that. If a trans person snaps at you after you've misgendered them, even if it were a genuine mistake, you're likely only the most recent in a long line of things, such as those discussed here, that they've had to deal with recently. Don't set out to make it all about yourself and make their life even harder. Just let them be. Understand that the pain is both constant and real. I mean, there are days where I do get a little like that. I deal with one thing after another and I just try to keep my cool, but all I'm doing is building up tension, which sadly ends up lashing out at whoever just tips the scale. No matter how big of an issue that occurrence really was. Think of people like Tesla coils. It doesn't matter where the majority of the charge comes from, it's where that last little bit comes from that's important. So anyway, I hope I've given you something to think about in this video. Take care now. Hi there, I'd just like to say a few things here at the end of the video before you go. First, I'd like to thank everyone who's ever donated to the channel via Patreon, giving a special thanks to the following people: Hannah Banghart, Matthew Kovac, Brad R, John Schoenrock, Alexander Williams, Ernst Puna, and Daniel Martinez. Your support has ensured this channel its ability to grow over the years, and really is the only thing that manages to keep the channel afloat. I'd also like to ask that you comment down below and like this video, as well as subscribe and follow Essence of Thought on Facebook and Twitter. Please also consider following Atheist Alliance International on Facebook, an organisation dedicated to helping atheists around the globe. Any comments utilising language which insults others on the basis of perceived gender, sexuality, ethnicity or ability both mental and physical will be removed immediately, and the commenter may be blocked on the moderator's discretion. Let's keep this space one which upholds the humanist values. Thank you.